TB infection comes from infected animal contacting non-infected animals. So there is a tiny risk of any specific animal, any specific livestock being infected from the wildlife. The risk is still very small. But it is reasonable to try to break down that interface between livestock and wild animals. Keep your hay as clean as you can. Store your roughage in a manner that's least attractive to wildlife, both white-tailed deer and elk. If you can feed your cows in a way that doesn't allow commingling of cows and wildlife at the time of feeding, because we think the nose-to-nose transmission really accounts for 95% of our transmission. It's nose to nose. The infected one's got to cough, this one's got to inhale at the same time. That's the way it transmits. And in dairy barns, in the past 100 years, that's the way we saw it. Like Bessie always stood here, and then these 3 cows down the line, and these 3 cows, those are the ones that have tuberculosis, right next door to the cow that started shedding. That's what we've seen in ruminant species. We have no reason to believe that's not the way it's working in wildlife. The other risk factors, elk coughing on your hay and then feeding it, probably significantly less risk than co-feeding at the same time. So sometimes that's hard to avoid if you're right up against the bush and that's where you're feeding your cows because that's where the shelter is. Sometimes there's some hard management changes to make to try to segregate your cows from free-roaming wildlife. But in that ecosystem, you really have to try to do that.
The barrier fencing program is basically one component of the overall TB management plan that breaks that cycle of disease transmission and interaction of wildlife and cattle.
The fencing program is an integral part of the TB strategy for this whole organizations that are involved.
I'm about 99% sure that the elk contaminated the feed that we fed to the livestock, because the year previous to 2001, our cow herd was tested for TB and given a clean bill of health. Now 2 years later, when they were tested, was the year after 2001 when the elk were in our hay. And 2 years later, we've got 2 positive animals in our cow herd.
You know, there's a lot of people that live around the park, and their livelihood has really been hurt. I mean, we just lost our whole herd of cattle, and I wouldn't want to go through that again. It's a hard, tough thing to do. We have to also protect our beef industry, that's for sure. That's number one. Being beef producers at one time, we know exactly what they're going through. And it's sad. But I think good measures have been taken, and there's some good ideas going on, and these elk fences are a big step forward.
When we look at deciding, of course we can't offer a fence immediately to everyone based on budgetary requirements. So we have to look at certain factors. So we've been focusing in certain areas where TB is found. So there's a criteria as to the closeness that the farmer is to a previous TB occurrence in wildlife or cattle, or so deer and elk. We also look at how close the farmer is to the park line. Farmers can call our Manitoba conservation officers to call about complaints that they have for wildlife damaging their bale stacks. So they would make a call to us, and we would record it in our district occurrence reports. So district occurrence reports indicate that there's been a problem with wildlife on their farm. And Manitoba crop insurance claims. They also give us an indication that, of course, wildlife has been interacting with their bales and stored grain. So we use all those criteria to decide which farmers we're going to likely go to first to offer a fence. Once we've done our basic criteria ranking and we get an idea of who we want to go visit, myself and other staff that we have with conservation will call up the farmer and try to arrange a day when we're going to go by and visit, and we generally tell them it's, we need to have at least about an hour of their time.
Hi, Carl. How do you do that?
Have you had deer and elk hit your hay bales in the winter in the past?
Yeah. Oh yeah, we've had them for, they're always coming in from the middle of the night into the cattle here, close to around the buildings here. Years ago there was 150 elk out here in this meadow here, you know.
A major part of the agreement indicates how the fence is going to get put together. There'll be, the poles will be about 10 feet above the ground, and it'll be an 8-foot high fence with an option to install additional barbed wire on the top if wildlife gets over. And we have these standards so that we can ensure that fences are installed the same way all around this Riding Mountain Park. So we put out a tender to have somebody install this sort of thing. And most of these fences are of a standard size, about 250 by 250 feet. Mm-hmm. And our estimates are that in a normal year you can if you didn't stack your bales, you could at least fit 1,500. But if you stack them, you could put up to 3,000 into these standard fences. If you have a exceptionally good year and you have more bales than the fence can store, if you have to store some of those bales outside and you need it, you could request compensation for those if the fence does not have any more capacity. Mm-hmm. However, if your fence has the capacity to store them, the requirement in here is to store them all in this inside. And if you happen to have bales left out that could have been stored inside, you probably wouldn't qualify for compensation in those ones. If you are interested, we could probably get the agreement signed. I would witness it, you would sign it, mm-hmm. and then we can go out into your yard and measure up the dimensions of the fence. You could tell us where you'd like the gates, and mm-hmm. and then we'll draw a diagram on here, and it'll detail the number of poles, the amount of wire, the amount of gates, and it'll all be part of the agreement. Would you be interested in one?
I think I would be.
Okay, so you sign there as the property owner, and I'll witness it. Great. Well, we'll go up to the yard, but really nice doing business with you. Hopefully this will help your operation.
Yeah.
Thanks very much, Carl.
Yeah, thanks.
We go around staking the area, and there's usually like anywhere from 40 to 60 posts per site. And we go around, there's 2 crews of us, 3 in our crew and 2 in another crew. And we do the drilling, and they come behind. We go down 4 feet, and they come up, stand a post. It usually takes about one good day to put in one site. And we drill, and we tap and stand up the post in one day. Then it takes like probably 4 hours to put up the wire the next day after. And depending on how many gates there is here, there's 2 gates, and it'll take us like 3 hours maybe at the most. And usually anywhere from around 15 hours should be if you have a good site.
We have always piled some hay out here, and the deer would come, but it was mainly the elk, and they would start probably after the new year when the snow got deep and it got colder, and they would come from that direction, and they would be in the hay. So after a few years of that, we started surrounding the hay with straw 2 bales high, but that was a lot of work. And then you had to use your straw up, so that left the place for the elk to get in. So particularly in March and April when we were calving, they'd be in here 15 or 20 animals every night. And you'd only see them going back just as at daylight, and you wouldn't usually see them, but they got very habituated. There was a herd that calved on our place on the other side of the road. Their calves, they stayed out with their calves quite a bit of the summer, and then they came back to eat here, and they felt quite at home. And so they were really making a mess of the hay. And then when this program came up that we could get a fence, we thought that was probably our best option. And so we talked to Dan Karnowski, and he said, sure, that's what we're wanting to do. So they came and looked at it, we measured it out and saw what we needed, and then it was up to them after that. They brought the material, dug the holes, and put in the posts, and we helped put the wire on, which was just a matter of, I think, a morning. So it didn't cost us anything. And last year in the hunting season after New Year's, the first season after New Year's, I had the gates closed and I noticed some tracks coming one day, and so I came out here and they had walked up and down the fence here. Looked like they'd spent the whole night. They had the snow packed down and they'd checked out everything trying to get in, and they went away and they've never been back. So it seems like it was effective. Other times when it was surrounded with straw, even if it was completely surrounded, they would come around and they would pick at the straw and try to get in. They can really smell the good alfalfa, and you know, it was only 4 feet from the fence in some places, and they tried their best. I wanted to make sure that we had a big enough one that we could come in with the wagons and still have room to turn around and drive out, so that you don't have to carry every bale through the gate. And I think that's an important thing, is that the fence is big enough so that it's not a big nuisance getting your hay into it.
We haven't had a real bad year yet. This will be the second winter for the fence, but when we do get deep snow, I know that it'll change and they'll be coming in. It'll be very effective when we do get that year when we really need it. It's going to be very effective, and it'll help us to sleep a little better at nights when you do get one of those years.